The massive glass dome of Harmony Station gleamed like a crystal palace floating in the darkness of space. Ambassador Hien-Woo Park stood at the center of it all, watching the purple and gold swirls of the distant nebula paint patterns across the transparent walls. This place had been his second home for 15 years, and before him, his father had walked these same halls for 20 years. The Park family had been keeping peace in the galaxy for longer than most species had known about space travel. Hien-Woo straightened his dark blue diplomatic coat, feeling the weight of the small golden badge that marked him as a Terran ambassador. The badge was simple, just Earth surrounded by olive branches, but every alien in the galaxy knew what it meant. It meant someone was here to listen, to find solutions, to stop the shooting before it started. Across the curved negotiation table sat two beings who couldn't have been more different. General Vexstar looked like someone had crossed a giant red lobster with a tank. His thick crimson shell was covered in battle scars, and his forearms never stopped moving, drumming fingers, adjusting weapons, checking tactical displays. Everything about him screamed warrior in a language that didn't need words. Trade. Mr. Killinara was the complete opposite. Her body looked like liquid mercury shaped into a woman, constantly shifting and flowing. Where Vexstar was all sharp edges and aggression, she was smooth curves and calculated greed. Her silver skin rippled with patterns that showed her emotional state right now. Those patterns looked like gold coins spinning in endless circles. "Look, we've been at this for 6 hours, Hien-Woo said, keeping his voice calm despite the tension in the room. The Altair system has enough resources for everyone. The Collective wants to mine the asteroids, fine. The Empire wants to make sure their trade routes stay safe, also fine. We can work this out." Vexstar's mandibles clicked together like scissors. "You humans always think everything can be solved with talk. Sometimes you need to fight to know who's stronger. That's how the universe works." "The universe works however we decide to make it work," Hien-Woo replied. 300 years ago, my ancestors thought the same way you do. Then we learned that cooperation gets better results than conquest." Killinara's surface shifted to show swirling dollar signs. "The ambassador speaks wisdom. War is expensive. Peace is profitable. The Collective has calculated that shared mining operations would increase resource extraction by 47%, while reducing security costs by 31%. "Numbers?" Vexstar growled. "Always with the numbers. What about honor? What about strength? What about proving who deserves to rule? What about building something better than what came before?" Hien-Woo asked. "Look around this station. 50 different species work here together. We've got crystalline engineers maintaining the life support systems, aquatic navigators plotting the safest routes through the nebula, and insectoid farmers growing food for everyone. It works because we make it work." The general's compound eyes fixed on Hien-Woo with something that might have been respect. "Your species is strange, human. You fight when you must, but you prefer to talk. You could conquer half the galaxy with your technology, but instead you sit in meetings and listen to complaints. That's exactly why it works," Hien-Woo smiled. "Power that doesn't need to prove itself is real power." Before anyone could respond, the chamber doors burst open with a loud hiss. Ji Hai-Kim rushed in, and Hien-Woo had never seen his assistant look so shaken. Ji Hai had been with him for 5 years, handling everything from alien food poisoning to diplomatic incidents that nearly started wars. "Ambassador," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "We've got an emergency transmission from Earth Command, Priority Alpha." The room's holographic projector hummed to life, filling the space above the table with the image of Admiral Seo Kajin Lee. The Admiral looked like he had aged 10 years since Hien-Woo had last seen him. His usually perfect uniform was wrinkled, his silver hair disheveled, and his eyes held the kind of pain that came from delivering terrible news. "Hien-Woo," the Admiral said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "I'm sorry to interrupt your negotiations, but we have a situation. The colony. Ship New Busan has gone dark." Last transmission was 18 hours ago. Hien-Woo felt his blood turn to ice. The New Busan was a massive ship, 3 kilometers long and home to 50,000 colonists heading for the new world of Kepler 44 to be. It was supposed to be a routine journey, just like hundreds of others over the past century. gone dark? Hyenwu asked, "What do you mean equipment failure?" "Navigation error. Negative." Admiral Lee shook his head grimly. Their last transmission was a distress signal. It reported being attacked by unidentified vessels. Then nothing. "We've sent search teams, but the ships completely disappeared." The words hit Hyenwu like a physical blow. His daughter, Minyoung, was on that ship. She was leading a team of agricultural specialists to help establish farming operations on the New World. The last message he'd received from her had been full of excitement about the hydroponic systems she was designing. Tact. Trade Minister Kilinara's surface shifted to show jagged, angry patterns. Who would attack a colony ship? There's no profit in harming civilians. "That's what we need to find out," Admiral Lee continued. "The attack happened in the border region between Korthok and Zephyrian space. We're hoping someone at your negotiations might have information." Hyenwu's eyes moved between his negotiation partners. Vextar's mandibles were clicking rapidly, a sign of agitation in his species. Kilinara had gone completely still, her surface showing no patterns at all. General Hyenwu said quietly, "Do you know anything about this?" Vextar's silence stretched for several heartbeats too long. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a tone that made everyone in the room go cold. "The new Busan was traveling through what we consider our expansion corridor. They were warned to change course. They chose not to listen. You attacked a civilian vessel." Hyenwu's voice was barely above a whisper. "We created a demonstration of resolve," Vextar replied, his compound eyes avoiding direct contact. "Sometimes, to achieve peace, one must first establish the consequences of defiance." The room fell silent except for the distant hum of the station's life support systems. Hyenwu stared at the general, trying to process what he'd just heard. 50,000 people. Farmers, teachers, children, scientists, all murdered to make a point in a territorial dispute. "You killed 50,000 innocent people," Hyenwu said. His voice still quiet, but carrying an edge that made even Vextar shift uncomfortably.
Oh.
"To gain leverage in a mining rights negotiation, I created clarity," Vextar replied. "Now humanity understands the price of ignoring Korthok sovereignty. Future negotiations will be more ... productive." Something fundamental shifted in Hyenwu's chest. For 30 years, he'd believed that every species could be reasoned with. Every conflict could be resolved through patience and understanding. He'd dedicated his life to proving that civilization could evolve beyond violence. He'd been wrong. He said, his voice carrying a finality that made everyone in the room straighten, "Send a message to all human diplomatic missions, trade posts, research stations, and peacekeeping forces throughout the galaxy. They are to cease all operations immediately and return to human space." Sir Jihai's confusion was obvious. "All of them," Hyenwu repeated. "Every ambassador, every trade negotiator, every aid worker, every peacekeeper. Earth is taking a permanent recess from galactic affairs. You cannot simply abandon your responsibilities," Kilinara protested, her surface now showing patterns of genuine alarm. "The galaxy depends on human mediation. Without your species, conflicts will escalate beyond control." Hyenwu stood slowly, his diplomatic training warring with something much darker rising within him. "The galaxy should have thought of that before deciding our children were acceptable casualties." As he walked toward the exit, alarms began sounding throughout the station, not emergency alarms, but the systematic shutdown warnings that indicated human-operated systems were going offline. The lights dimmed as human technicians began the process of abandoning their posts. "This meeting," Hyenwu said without looking back, "is permanently adjourned." The galaxy was about to learn what 3 centuries of human patience had been protecting them from: the massive cargo ship. Soul Trader had been Captain Taeyong Choi's home for 12 years. He'd hauled everything from medical supplies to mining equipment across 47 star systems, keeping the galaxy's trade routes running like clockwork. Now, as he powered down the engines for the final time, felt like he was killing an old friend. The orbital platform above Kepler 4-4 to be buzzed with frantic activity. Dozens of human cargo vessels were docking simultaneously, their crews going through the same heartbreaking ritual. Ships that had crossed the galaxy for decades were being systematically shut down. Their routes abandoned, their alien customers left scrambling for alternatives that didn't exist. Zormak, the station's reptilian supervisor, watched the proceedings. With growing horror, his green scales had turned a sickly yellow color, a sure sign of panic among his species. The alien stood nearly 8 feet tall, with arms that could crush steel, but right now he looked as helpless as a child. "Captain Choi," Zormak said, his voice carrying the hissing accent of his people, "surely you can reconsider. Your cargo runs are the lifeline for 4 dozen worlds. Without your shipments, entire colonies will starve." Tae-young sealed the cargo bay doors with a final, decisive click. Inside were medical supplies destined for a children's hospital on Rigel Prime, food supplies for a mining colony on Vega 7, and construction materials for a school on Tau Ceti. All of it would stay in the cargo hold. Then those worlds should have spoken up when the Korthak Empire decided to murder 50,000 of our people. Tae-young replied, his voice flat and emotionless. Every species in the galaxy knew what happened to the New Busan. Not one government filed a protest. Not one leader demanded justice. Your silence told us exactly what human lives are worth to you. The platform's communication system crackled to life as other human captains reported their status. "Soul Trader, this is Pacific Runner. All cargo sealed and crew evacuated, ready for departure. Pacific Runner, this is Golden Gate Express. Engines shut down, all systems locked. Locals are offering us triple rates to stay, but orders are orders. Golden Gate Express, this is New Horizon. Just finished loading the last of our people. Some of the alien workers are crying. They know what's coming." Tae-young looked out at the alien workers on the platform. Most of them had worked alongside humans for years, learning human methods, adapting to human efficiency standards. They stood in small groups, watching their human colleagues pack up and leave forever. Captain Zormak tried again, his desperation making his voice crack. "What about the trade agreements? The contracts? Some of these routes have been running for over a century. Contracts can be broken," Tae-young said simply. "Lives can't be brought back." Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Sujin Yoon was packing up equipment that represented 30 years of medical research. The genetic plague that had been ravaging Gamma Hydri was finally responding to her experimental treatments. In just 3 more months, she could have had a cure that would save millions of lives. But orders were orders. High Healer Ventara, the planet's chief medical officer, watched with growing panic as Sujin sealed her research samples in quarantine containers. Ventara looked like a cross between an octopus and a jellyfish, with translucent skin that showed her internal organs pulsing with distress. "Dr. Yoon," Ventara pleaded, her tentacles wrapping around Sujin's arm. "You cannot leave now. The children in the eastern provinces are finally showing signs of recovery. Your gene therapy is working." Sujin gently but firmly removed the alien's grip. "Then perhaps your government should have protested when the Korthak announced their intention to use civilian casualties as diplomatic tools. Every species in the galaxy heard their threats. No one said a word. But we are not part of the Galactic Council," Ventara protested. "We have no voice in their decisions. You have news networks. You have communication systems. Could have spoken out. Instead, you stayed silent and hoped the violence would stay far away from your world." Sujin's voice carried a coldness that made the alien healer recoil. "Your silence was complicity." The medical facility's main computer began shutting down as human technicians remotely wiped their research data. Decades of collaborative medical research disappeared in seconds, leaving the alien medical staff staring at blank screens. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on 1,000 worlds. On the industrial planet of Proxima Forge, engineer Kodong Wook stood in the control room of the massive manufacturing complex that had been his life's work. The facility covered an entire continent, producing everything from starship components to household appliances for 17 different star systems. The alien workers, a mix of insectoid, hive minds, and crystalline silicon-based beings, watched. in stunned silence as their human supervisors began the shutdown sequence. These were systems that had run continuously for 200 years, never failing, never stopping. Foreman Kexler, a mantis-like creature with 4 arms and compound eyes, clicked his mandibles in distress. Engineer KO, you cannot do this. These factories employ 6 million beings. They feed the bellies and warm the homes of countless worlds. Without them, entire civilizations will collapse. Dongwook's fingers moved across the control panels with practiced efficiency. Each button press shut down another section of the vast complex. Then those civilizations should have found their voice when 50,000 humans were murdered in cold blood. We've been keeping your worlds running for centuries. Where were you when we needed you? We are workers, not politicians, Kexler protested. We have no say in governmental decisions. You have families. You have communities. Have voices. Dongwook sealed the final control panel and turned to face the alien workers. Every species in the galaxy heard about the new Busan. Not one civilian protest, not one strike, not one demand for justice. You all just kept your heads down and hoped someone else would handle the problem. The main power core began its shutdown sequence, and the lights started dimming throughout the complex. 2 centuries of industrial progress grinding to a halt in a single day, but the most disturbing reports came from the Outer Rim territories, where human military forces had been quietly mobilizing. Admiral Seok Jin Lee stood on the bridge of the newly commissioned dreadnought Righteous Fury, watching through the massive viewports as the shipyard around them worked at impossible speeds. The shipyard itself was a marvel of human engineering, a structure so large it could be seen from 3 star systems away. But the vessels being constructed inside it were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Sleek, predatory shapes that seemed to bend light around them. Weapon systems that hummed with barely contained energy. Armor that looked like it could shrug off the combined firepower of entire fleets. Commander Myung Park approached with her status report. She was young for her rank, but her eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen too much violence. Withdrawal is proceeding on schedule, Admiral, she reported. All human civilians have been evacuated from contested sectors. Industrial capacity has been redirected to military production. Alien species are beginning to panic as their infrastructure fails. Through the viewports, they could see other human ships arriving from across the galaxy. Merchant vessels, research ships, diplomatic transports, all of them carrying human personnel back to the safety of human space. But they weren't returning empty-handed. Each ship carried data, intelligence, and detailed knowledge of every alien civilization they'd worked with for centuries. And our special projects? Admiral Lee asked. Dr. Woo-Song Kim reports that the xenobiology program has cataloged the genetic weaknesses of every major species. Dr. Shin. Ha-Young's Cyber Warfare Division has successfully mapped the computer networks of 43 alien civilizations. Colonel Park Sun-Ho's Intelligence Division has identified the critical infrastructure points that keep each civilization functioning. Admiral Lee nodded grimly. 3 centuries of being the galaxy's peacekeepers taught us everything we needed to know about our neighbors, and we're going to put that knowledge to use. The Admiral activated the shipyard's main communication system. Across human space, similar facilities were receiving the same message. All ships, this is Admiral Lee. Begin Phase 2 of Operation Withdrawal. It's time to show the galaxy what 300 years of patience was protecting them from. As the message spread through the human fleet, the aliens watching from nearby systems began to understand that something fundamental had changed. The humans weren't just leaving, they were preparing for something much worse. The galaxy had spent 3 centuries taking human kindness for granted. Now they were about to learn what happened when that kindness was withdrawn. In the depths of human space, massive war machines were stirring to life. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days. Weapons that could crack planets. Technologies that the aliens had never imagined. Controlling it all were humans who had spent 3 centuries learning every weakness, every fear, every vulnerability of their galactic neighbors. The withdrawal was complete. The real war was about to begin. Commander Park Sun-Ho, floated in the zero-gravity command center of the Silent Observer, his hands dancing across holographic displays that showed the approaching alien fleet. The stealth ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, completely invisible to every type of sensor the galaxy's species had ever developed. They'd spent 3 centuries studying alien detection methods, learning every trick, every frequency, every scanning pattern. Now that knowledge was being used to hide humanity's most advanced warship in plain sight. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, reported Lieutenant Choi Minesio from her sensor station. The young officer's voice was steady, despite the magnitude of what they were witnessing. 12 ships in formation. For Korthok heavy cruisers, 3 Zephyrian merchant vessels, probably loaded with scanning equipment to Altarian science ships, and 3 smaller vessels from the minor species. Sunho smiled grimly. Right on schedule. Following the breadcrumbs, we left them perfectly. The alien expedition had been carefully manipulated to arrive at this exact moment. False intelligence reports leaked through compromised communication networks. Fake cargo manifests showing human military build-up in the Kepler-22 system. Even staged conversations between human refugees in alien spaceports. All designed to draw the galaxy's most curious species to this one location. Captain Mordok of the Korthok Empire stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crimson Talon. The massive warrior's red carapace was polished to a mirror shine, and his forearms moved constantly as he reviewed tactical displays. Next to him, Science Director Yelena of the Zephyrian Collective rippled with nervous energy, her mercury-like skin showing patterns of deep concentration. "Human space begins at the edge of this system," Mordok announced to his crew. "We will finally see what they've been hiding." "Sensors are detecting massive industrial activity," reported his tactical officer. "Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases." What they found when they crested the system's edge defied everything they thought they knew about human civilization. The Kepler-22 system had been transformed into something that looked like a scene from humanity's darkest science fiction. Massive. Orbital shipyards stretched across space like giant mechanical spider webs, each 1 kilometers long and bristling with construction equipment. But these weren't building the peaceful exploration vessels or cargo ships the aliens were used to. Seeing from humanity, these shipyards were producing warships, sleek, predatory vessels that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Ships with weapon systems that hummed with barely contained energy. Carriers that could house entire fleets of fighter craft. Dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Korthok. "Arsenal, by the sacred crystals," whispered Science Officer Nixara from the Altarian delegation. Her species looked like living gemstones, with crystalline bodies that changed color based on their emotions. Right now, she was flickering between deep purple and black colors that indicated terror and disbelief, but it was the planets themselves that truly horrified the expedition members. Kepler-2 to be had once been a beautiful garden world, home to a small human research colony studying exotic plant life. The aliens had visited it many times over the decades, enjoying the peaceful atmosphere and the humans' famous hospitality. Now, as their ships drew closer, they could see that the entire planet had been transformed into something else entirely. The surface showed the geometric precision of industrial farming on a scale that defied imagination. Massive agricultural complexes stretched from pole to pole, each one perfectly optimized for maximum food production. Atmospheric processors worked around the clock, maintaining ideal growing conditions for crops designed to feed an army of unprecedented size. "They've turned an entire world into a single farm," Nixara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "The mathematical precision is... terrifying." The planet's cities had been replaced with processing centers and storage facilities. Automated. Harvesters the size of buildings moved across endless fields, gathering crops that were immediately processed and packaged for military consumption. The humans had calculated exactly how much food would be needed to feed their war machine, and they built a planet-sized farm to provide it. Kepler-2c revealed an even more disturbing transformation. The former mining world now housed manufacturing complexes that covered entire continents. Automated factories worked day and night, producing standardized military equipment with an efficiency that made even the Zephyrians' resource optimization look primitive. It's impossible, breathed Trade Minister Valkara from the Zephyrian delegation. No species has ever achieved this level of industrial coordination. The logistics alone should be impossible. But the humans had done it. Massive assembly lines produced everything from personal weapons to starship components. Robotic systems that never tired, never made mistakes, never needed rest. The factories operated with a precision that spoke of centuries of planning and preparation. Captain Mordoc's tactical officer reported with obvious fear in his voice, "Sir, we're detecting weapon signatures that aren't in any of our databases. The energy readings are off the charts." "And the ship production rates?" Mordoc asked. "They're launching new vessels every few hours. At this rate, they'll have a fleet larger than the combined forces of all galaxy species within a year." But it was the outermost planet that sent true terror through the expedition. Kepler 22d had become a research facility that covered the entire world. The planet's surface bristled with laboratories, testing facilities, and what appeared to be biological research stations designed for one specific purpose: studying alien physiology. "They're not just building a military," Science Director Yelanath realized with growing horror. "They're building a military specifically designed to fight us." The research stations were clearly marked with the biological signatures of every known species. Facilities designed to test weapons against Korthok armor, laboratories developing poisons that would affect Zephyrian metabolism, research centers working on frequencies that would disrupt Altarian crystal matrices. "How long have they been planning this?" asked Captain Zarthik of the minor species delegation. The answer came from an unexpected source. Admiral Syok Jin Lee's image appeared on all their screens simultaneously, broadcast from the human fleet that had suddenly decloaked around them. The aliens hadn't even known they were surrounded. "Welcome to human space," Admiral Lee said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who held the fate of civilizations in his hands. "You wanted to see what we've been doing since you murdered our civilians? Allow me to show you." The holographic display shifted to show a strategic map of the entire galaxy. Every major military installation, every trade route, every government facility of every species was marked with precise detail. But these weren't just intelligence reports, they were target lists. "We've been studying you for 300 years, Admiral Lee continued. Every cultural weakness, every technological dependency, every biological vulnerability. We've been your peacekeepers, your mediators, your friends. That meant we had to understand everything about you." The map zoomed in on the Korthok Empire, showing detailed analyses of their military doctrine, their warrior culture, their technological limitations. Your species values honor above all else. Your military tactics assume you'll face other warrior cultures who fight by your rules. You've never faced an enemy that simply doesn't care about honor. The display shifted to Zephyrian space, revealing the intricate web of trade routes and resource dependencies that kept their civilization running. Your species has built everything around efficiency and resource accumulation. But you've never actually developed most of the technologies you use. You've just accumulated them from other species. You're wealthy, but you're not innovative. One by one, Admiral Lee systematically dismantled every species' understanding of their own strengths and weaknesses. The Altarians' crystalline bodies were vulnerable to specific harmonic frequencies. The insectoid hive minds could be disrupted by targeting their queen nodes. The aquatic species couldn't survive outside their environmental suits for more than a few hours. "Every species in this galaxy has made the same mistake," Admiral Lee concluded. "You've assumed that humanity's patience was weakness, that our willingness to mediate was fear of conflict. You were wrong." The display showed the final revelation: massive evacuation programs that had moved every human civilian to secure locations, leaving behind only military personnel and automated systems. The humans had been preparing for this moment for years. Had 3 centuries to learn that cooperation was more effective than domination. "Since you chose not to learn, we're going to teach you." As the alien expedition realized they were completely surrounded by human warships they couldn't even see until now, Admiral Lee delivered his final message. You have 48 hours to return to your governments and inform them that humanity's diplomatic phase is over. After that, we begin the final lesson. The galaxy was about to learn what 3 centuries of human patience had been protecting them from. The orbital command platform Nemesis hung in space like a dark metal moon, its surface bristling with communication arrays and tactical displays. General Kim Jae-hyun stood at the center of it all, surrounded by holographic screens showing every corner of the galaxy. After 3 years of careful planning, Operation Pax Humana was finally beginning. "All units report ready status," he announced. To his command staff, around him, dozens of officers monitored the most complex military operation in galactic history. This wasn't going to be a traditional war with massive fleet battles and planetary bombardments. This was going to be surgery, precise, calculated, and utterly devastating. Colonel Lee Yun-soo approached with her tactical report. The young officer had spent the last 2 years studying Korthok military doctrine, learning every detail of their warrior culture and combat strategies. "Sir, cyber warfare. Division reports successful infiltration of Korthok military networks. Major Wang Kate's team has taken control of their automated defense systems." On the main display, the proud homeworld of the Korthok Empire appeared in real time. The planet's surface was covered with massive military installations, orbital, defense platforms, weapon manufactories, training academies where young Korthok learned the warrior's way. It was the heart of a civilization built entirely around the concept of honorable combat that was about to change. "Execute Phase 1, General Kim ordered. Across Korthok space, their own weapons began turning against them. Automated turrets that had protected their worlds for centuries suddenly swiveled to target Korthok vessels. Defense satellites that had never failed began broadcasting human messages instead of military communications. The proud red banners of the Korthok Empire were replaced on every screen with simple messages in perfect Korthok language. "Your war is over." War Prime Gexter stood in his command chamber on the Korthok homeworld, watching his tactical displays. With growing disbelief, his crimson carapace was scarred from 100 battles. His 4 arms had wielded weapons since childhood. His compound eyes had never seen defeat. Now he was watching his entire military dissolve without firing a shot. "This cannot be happening," he snarled at his tactical officer. "Deploy the attack fleets. Show these humans what real warriors can do." But every time Korthok forces moved to engage the human fleet, something impossible occurred. The humans simply weren't there when the attacks arrived. Korthok sensors would detect human ships, target them with their most powerful weapons, and fire only to hit empty space. Human vessels would materialize behind them, launch surgical strikes against critical systems, then vanish again like ghosts. "Sir," his tactical officer reported with obvious fear. "We've lost contact with 17 shipyards, 34 training facilities, and all our major weapon production centers. The humans aren't trying to fight our military. They're making it impossible for us to have a military." The psychological impact was even more devastating than the physical destruction. The Korthok had built their entire civilization around the concept of honorable combat between warriors. They had ritual challenges, formal declarations of war, ancient codes that governed how battles should be fought. They understood conquest, and defeat, victory, and death. They had no idea how to deal with an enemy that simply refused to play by any rules they recognized. "This isn't warfare," Gexter growled, his mandibles clicking with frustration.
"I wanted extermination."
Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, Trade Prime Killinara was discovering that her civilization's greatest strength had become its ultimate weakness. The Zephyrian Collective had spent thousands of years accumulating technologies from other species, buying, trading, and sometimes stealing the innovations of dozens of different civilizations. Their silvery cities gleamed with devices they didn't fully understand, but had learned to operate. Dr. Shin Ha-young sat in her cyber warfare command center, her fingers dancing across interfaces that controlled the digital backbone of 17 different alien civilizations. The young computer expert had spent 3 years mapping every network, every system, every piece of technology that kept alien societies running. Beginning Phase 2 of Zephyrian neutralization, she announced to her team, What happened next would be remembered as the most elegant military victory in galactic history. The humans didn't destroy Zephyrian technology, they made it obsolete. Across Zephyrian space, the rare elements that formed the backbone of their trade empire suddenly became worthless. Human technology demonstrated more efficient alternatives that could be produced from common materials. The sophisticated computer networks that managed their resource distribution were quietly replaced by human systems that ran everything more efficiently but under human control. Trade Prime, her economic advisor, reported in growing panic. Our entire resource portfolio has lost 90% of its value. The humans have introduced alternatives to everything we control. Kilinara's Mercury-like form rippled with patterns of disbelief. Impossible. Some of these technologies took millennia to develop. The humans developed better versions in 3 years. They're not just more efficient, they're completely different approaches that make our methods look primitive. But the most devastating aspect of the human campaign wasn't military or economic, it was social. Dr. Park Sungmin, of the Human Sociological Warfare Division, had studied the power structures of every major civilization for decades. He understood exactly how each society maintained control over its population. Now that knowledge was being weaponized. On worlds where governments oppressed their populations, those populations suddenly found themselves equipped with advanced communication networks, sophisticated weapons, and detailed intelligence about their oppressors' weaknesses. Revolutions erupted simultaneously across 47 systems, each one perfectly timed and precisely coordinated. On planets where slavery provided the economic foundation, the slaves simply vanished overnight. Human ships appeared without warning, evacuated entire populations, and disappeared before local authorities could respond. The freed beings were relocated to human-controlled sectors where they were given citizenship, education, and the opportunity to contribute to the human war effort. Commander An Sujin stood on the bridge of the Human Liberation Vessel Freedoms, Dawn watching as another group of freed slaves was brought aboard. These beings had been property just hours ago. Now they were looking at their human rescuers with a mixture of awe and gratitude. That's the last transport from the hegemony. Worlds, reported her first officer. 17,000 beings from 12 different species. Any resistance from the local authorities? They tried to stop us with their patrol fleet. We disabled their weapons and left them floating in space with emergency life support. No casualties. This was the pattern across the galaxy. The humans weren't conquering through destruction, they were conquering through precision. Every strike targeted exactly the right pressure point to cripple a civilization's ability to wage war or oppress others, while leaving civilian populations unharmed. On the industrial world of Proxima Forge, Captain Lim Tae-yang supervised the conversion of former military installations into humanitarian aid centers. The massive weapon factories that had once produced instruments of war were now manufacturing medical equipment and food distribution systems. Sir, reported Lieutenant Yu Jamin, a former Korthok military personnel are requesting permission to join the reconstruction efforts. Tae-yang smiled. Granted. Give them uniforms, assignments, and a chance to prove that warrior instincts can be redirected toward protection instead of destruction. The transformation was happening faster than anyone had thought possible. Species that had spent millennia in constant warfare were discovering that their military expertise could be channeled into disaster response, exploration, and infrastructure protection. The humans weren't trying to eliminate alien cultures. They were trying to redirect them toward constructive purposes. Admiral Seo Chain Lee received regular reports from across the galaxy, each one confirming the success of humanity's radical approach. The Korthok Empire was being transformed into a galactic security force. Their warrior culture intact, but focused on protecting civilians rather than conquering them. The Zephyrian Collective was becoming a resource distribution network there. Efficiency retained, but their hoarding eliminated. Phase 4 complete, reported General Kim Jae-hyun. All major civilizations have been successfully integrated into the Pax Humana framework. Resistance has effectively ceased. Casualties? Admiral Lee asked. Fewer than 10,000 across all species combined? The surgical approach worked perfectly. The galaxy was more peaceful than it had been in recorded history. It was a peace imposed by human will, enforced by human technology, and maintained by human oversight. The age of galactic independence was over. The age of human guidance had begun. The Great Assembly Hall of Harmony Station had been rebuilt from the ground up. Ambassador Hyenwu Park barely recognized the place where he'd spent decades mediating galactic conflicts. The Crystal Dome still offered the same breathtaking view of the swirling nebula, but everything else had changed. Where chaos and competition once ruled, there was now order and cooperation. The seating arrangement told the whole story. Gone was the traditional circle where every species fought for equal status. Instead, the chamber was organized like a well-designed workplace, with species grouped by their strengths and capabilities. The warrior races sat together, planning security operations. The technical species formed engineering committees. The merchant cultures worked on trade optimization. It looked peaceful, efficient, and productive. It also looked nothing like the free galactic community that had existed for millennia. Hyun-Wu took his place at the central podium, wearing the simple gray uniform that marked him as a galactic coordination administrator. Around him, former enemies sat side by side, working together with an efficiency that would have been impossible under the old system. Former War Prime Gexther stood to deliver his report, and Hyenwu had to suppress a smile at the transformation. The massive Korthok warrior still looked intimidating with his red carapace and 4 powerful arms, but now he wore the blue uniform of the Galactic Protection Service. His compound eyes held a pride that came from saving lives rather than taking them. "Security report for Sector 7, Gexther announced, his voice carrying the same authority it always had, but directed toward protection rather than conquest. Trade routes remained completely secure. This month, protection fleets responded to 3 separate emergency situations. We rescued 2,000 civilians from a reactor failure on mining station Alpha 7, evacuated 4 colonies from the path of a solar flare, and provided medical assistance to a stranded exploration vessel. 0 casualties in all operations." The assembly murmured with approval. Under the old system, Gexther would have been reporting successful raids, conquered territories, and enemy casualties. Now he was saving lives and protecting the innocent. The warrior instincts were still there, but they'd been redirected toward heroism instead of violence. Former Trade Prime Killinara rose next, her Mercury-like form shimmering with patterns that indicated satisfaction and accomplishment. As Resource Distribution Administrator, she now managed the flow of materials across 47 star systems with mathematical precision. "Resource allocation report," she announced, her voice carrying the musical quality of her species. "Distribution efficiency has increased by 340% since the implementation of unified protocols. All systems are operating at optimal supply levels. Waste has been reduced to less than 0.3% across all categories. The world is experiencing shortages of essential materials." It was an incredible achievement. Under the old system, entire worlds had starved while others hoarded resources. Wars had been fought over mineral rights and trade routes. Now, every being in the galaxy had access to what they needed to live and thrive. But everyone in the chamber understood the price of this efficiency. The cooperation existed because humanity had made competition impossible. High above the assembly floor, Dr. Shin Hayoung sat in the human observation deck, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that controlled the galaxy's digital backbone. Every message sent, every transaction processed, every governmental decision made, all of it flowed through systems that humanity had built and maintained. "Any signs of resistance movements?" asked Colonel Liansu, settling into the chair beside her. As the Chief of Human Security Operations, Li monitored potential threats to the new order from across the galaxy. Hayoung's screens showed a real-time map of galactic communications, with data streams flowing like rivers of light between star systems. Nothing significant. The Regeline Confederation tried to organize some kind of independence movement 6 months ago, but we intercepted their planning communications and redirected them. Instead of a rebellion, they ended up organizing the largest cultural festival in their history. How did that work? Simple. Every time they tried to send messages about overthrowing human tyranny, the recipients received invitations to submit artwork and musical performances for a unity celebration. By the time they realized what happened, half their population was busy preparing dance performances and poetry readings. Lee shook her head in amazement. 3 years ago, I was planning military campaigns. Now we're preventing wars by organizing art festivals. Down on the assembly floor, the reports continued. Former mining guild boss Vexcar, now infrastructure. Maintenance coordinator announced that all transportation networks were operating at 98% efficiency. Former pirate Lord Zaltherex, now emergency response director, reported that his reformed raiders had become the galaxy's most effective search and rescue force. It was a transformation that would have seemed impossible just 3 years earlier. Species that had been mortal enemies for millennia now worked together seamlessly. Pirates had become heroes. Warriors had become protectors. Merchants had become administrators, focused on the common good rather than personal profit. But the most remarkable change was in the younger generation. A group of students from the Galactic Service Institute entered the chamber, representing a dozen different species. They wore matching uniforms and worked together with a natural ease that their parents' generation had never achieved. Student Representative Kirith, young Korthok, whose carapace was still the bright green of youth, approached the podium. Honored administrators. The Student Council requests permission to propose a new joint exploration mission to the Andromeda Contact Zone. What's the mission objective? Ion Wu asked. We've detected signals that might indicate intelligent life in the neighboring galaxy. We want to send a peaceful contact mission with representatives from all major species to establish communication and friendship. It was exactly the kind of proposal that would have been impossible under the old system. No single species would have trusted others with first contact. Wars would have been fought over who got to make the initial approach. Now, the students naturally assumed they would work together. Former Science Director Yellenith, now Educational Coordination Administrator, stood to address the proposal. The Joint Exploration Program has been one of our greatest successes. Student teams combining Korthok, courage, Zephyrian technical skills, Therian analytical abilities, and human coordination have achieved remarkable results. And they do. It without any of the old prejudices, added cultural integration specialist Mordana. To them, cooperation isn't something imposed from above. It's just the natural way to approach any challenge. Hyunwoo felt a complex mix of emotions as he watched the proceedings. The galaxy was undeniably better than it had been. There was no war, no slavery, no systematic oppression. Scientific advancement was accelerating. Cultural exchange was flourishing. Every being had access to education, healthcare, and meaningful work. But it was also a galaxy where freedom meant choosing how to contribute to the common good, not whether to contribute. Where competition existed in art and science and culture, but not in the fundamental organization of society, where the possibility of returning to the old ways of violence and exploitation had been systematically eliminated. Final agenda item, Hyunwoo announced. Proposal for expansion of the Joint Colony Program to the Outer Rim territories. The proposal passed unanimously, as most did these days. Not because of coercion, but because the representatives had learned that cooperation achieved better results than competition. The human-designed systems made it easy to work together and difficult to work against each other as the assembly concluded. Hyunwoo stood once more at the great windows overlooking the nebula. Commissioner Park Sun-ho, his old colleague from the diplomatic corps, joined him at the viewing area. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd continued trying to change things through diplomacy? Sun-ho asked. Me, every day, Hyunwoo replied. But then I think about Min-young and the other 50,000 people who died because we weren't strong enough to protect them. I think about all the beings who are alive today because we ended the wars, eliminated the slavery, stopped the oppression. The galaxy is safer than it's ever been, Sun-ho agreed. But it's also controlled, guided, Hyunwoo corrected. We guide them away from choices that cause harm and toward choices that create prosperity and peace. As they watched, a mixed fleet of ships departed the station, Korthak security vessels escorting Zephyrian supply ships, while Tarian science vessels conducted research operations. It was a sight that would have been impossible under the old. A system where such cooperation would have been viewed as weakness or betrayal. The children growing up now will never know war, Haiyan Wu said quietly. They'll never see slavery. They'll never experience systematic oppression. They'll compete in building beautiful things rather than destroying them. And they'll never know what it means to be truly free to choose their own path, Sun Ho observed. Freedom is the ability to choose between available options, Haiyan Wu replied. We haven't eliminated their freedom, we've eliminated the harmful options. They're free to choose peace over war, cooperation over competition, justice over oppression. They're just not free to choose the alternatives. The stars wheeled overhead, each one now part of a galaxy united under human guidance. It wasn't the future humanity had originally envisioned when they first reached for the stars. But it was a future where Manung's death had meaning, where 50,000 lives had been exchanged for the salvation of billions. The galaxy had changed forever when humans stopped being nice. In its place, they had built something unprecedented in galactic history, a civilization where being kind, cooperative, and just wasn't just encouraged. It was the only option available, and perhaps, Haiyan Wu thought as he watched the peaceful traffic of ships carrying out their missions of protection, exploration, and aid. That was exactly what the galaxy had needed all along. The end.